I'm Tim Sheridan.
And I'm Jeremy Adams.
We're at Comics Online. Guys, we're at Comic-Con. We get to talk Green Lantern finally. I'm so excited to dive into Hal Jordan and Alan Scott with both of you guys. So thank you so much in advance for
you're
putting up
welcome
with
to
us.
have us. No.
That's true. So let's start off with Hal Jordan. Of course,
Yes.
Jeremy, you're 2 issues in, plus your Night Terrors 1 issue so far, exploring Hal. But it's you coming back to Hal Jordan after your time with the character with the animated series.
Yeah.
So how's it feel?
Oh, it's amazing. I mean, that was formative for me in my take on Hal Jordan. So being able to take such a big character, especially after The Flash, was a huge amount of pressure. But it's really fun to be able to just kind of bring him down to earth and give him some soap opera and some mystery about what's going on in space. So I'm loving it.
And I know we've talked a little bit about the fact that you're 2 issues in, then it jumps into an event series,
right,
and then you get to come back to where things were.
Yeah.
Can we talk about logistics as far as framing Night Terrors into your big plan for Hal?
The way that I look at most crossovers is like I do want it to be something valuable to the reader of the main line, so they're not feeling like, oh, we got to separate and do something else. So it's a great way to be concentrated on where Hal's headspace is in the series, and for me it's a great character dive so that I can just kind of explore his origin and what makes him tick. And what's great is Alex Segura, who's doing the backup of it, he does the heavy lifting because he's really diving into Sinestro. So by the time Night Terrors ends, everybody's going to know where he's at mentally, and that's going to kick off the next section of the Green Lantern where Sinestro's going to enact his plan and things will happen.
And so much happening with Green Lantern. Obviously, we know that the John Stewart book is going to be launching out of your book, but we also get Alan Scott getting his own title for the first time in years, decades even.
Years. Tag.
Tim,
decades.
tag in.
Yeah.
Tag me in.
No. Yeah. Oh, sorry, I didn't do it.
Okay.
Oh, we do that.
Yes.
Oh, see, I didn't know what we were doing. Yeah, the more powerful Green Lantern, the real Green Lantern is what we're talking about. Is that what? Yeah, get out of here. He's gone. Yeah, no, we're really. I mean, it's an incredible opportunity. I mean, he hasn't had his own title in nearly 75 years. You know, so as Green Lantern. I mean, it's a lot. I mean, I feel it's kind of a weight of responsibility a little bit, and also so much has changed with Alan, obviously, in the last decade or so, and we're taking everything that we know and everything we've learned about this character, the new information we have about him and his life, and we're going to get to see him through a lens we haven't seen before. The series takes place. If you saw the 6-page sort of on-ramp that we put in the DC Pride Through the Years book that came out, you see that the series takes place in the 1930s and 1940s. Most of it takes place in 1941, just after the formation of the Justice Society. But Alan is in a very difficult place. The world was in a very different place and a very difficult place during those years. But it's about, like a lot of great superhero stories, about coming to terms with your identity, figuring out, what is it like to have 2 secret identities. And in the end, what we're trying to do is to tell a really cool origin story for the Golden Age Red Lantern.
And obviously, we've had a little bit of tease with what that's going to do as far as the Crimson Flame tie-in, different pieces. Anything you could hint at, or anything you're excited about with Alan Scott? I mean,
I think people are going to get to see Alan Scott. They're going to get to see Alan. Well, let me tell you this: we're going to see Alan's origins from a slightly different angle. And the thing that we're getting to do, the conceit of the new Golden Age that was conceived by Jeff Johns, is that there are a group of characters who were removed from the timeline and who have now been reintroduced into the timeline. And because of that, in a sense, it can mean that the story that we think we know about Alan Scott was a retcon this whole time. So we're going to give you a chance to get to see something that may be possibly the real story. And the Red Lantern figures into that, as all great arch nemeses do.
Right.
He's essential to that story.
From a narrative standpoint, is it freeing or more challenging knowing that it's starting off with just the first arc in Alan's story, or more, are you laying the big picture seeds? How are you approaching this story specifically?
I mean, it's challenging to try and kind of make sure that we honor everything that's come before. This isn't a retcon. This isn't a let's throw out everything we think we know about Alan Scott and just rewrite history. We're just kind of shading it a new way with some new information. And that's a difficult trick to that's a difficult balancing act. But it's not only is it the biggest challenge, but it's the most fun of this series. I have to tell you, speaking of fun, I think Kian Tormey is an artist who is, I think, doing the best work of his career right now on this book, on stuff you haven't seen yet. And I think we're going to see him, really do some really impressive stuff. He is somebody who can live in the subtext and the emotion between characters. And that's something that was really important to us for this story. There's a lot of stuff that has to sort of happen on the page that maybe isn't happening in dialogue explicitly. But there's a lot of inner life to these characters, and this book is an opportunity for us to tell a story that way, and for Kian to really show what he can do.
Question for both of you, so no tagging required.
Oh, darn it.
But
Thank God.
the Green Lantern mythology is so rich, obviously going back decades. Why do you think readers keep coming back to these characters, whether it is Alan, whether it's Hal, Kyle, Guy, John, the list goes on? I mean, we're only talking Earth Lanterns at this point, but why do you think the readers keep coming back to these characters and wanting more from their world in particular?
You or me? What do you want to know?
Yeah, I want you to start, because then I'll do it right.
Yeah, then he'll explain why I'm wrong. It's wish fulfillment. It's a magic ring, and the fact that you can make anything with it, it's the greatest. And it's crazy to see that even in the Golden Age or even the Silver Age, how many different powers they used to have in a way. But the fact is, the idea of having a ring that you can manifest, I don't have to change this is how bad it would be. If I got a ring, I'd be like, I don't got to change the channel. I would use it to change the remote, to push the button on the remote. That's how lazy I am. But it's just that. You can fly, you can make a car, you can do anything, and it's just unrestrained imagination. And I think that's so appealing.
Well, and that's exactly right. And I think that and where it really hits home, I think, at least for me as a fan, and I think this is probably true for a lot of fans, is that a lot of times in a hero story, in a superhero story, you're bestowed with great powers, and now you're a changed person, and you're a new thing. You're a Superman, or something like that. These guys, these are people. These are guys like you and me. And they put on the ring, and they take off the ring, or they got to recharge the ring. Right. And they make a choice every day to be on the front lines and to become a hero again. And I think there's speaking of wish fulfillment, I think there's something like that, something about that's very appealing.
Right.
It's not, sometimes the being bestowed with powers can feel like a blessing or a curse, and we can play with those stories. With the Green Lantern characters, there's a reason they're they're cops, because these are the people who are the front lines who choose to go into danger and do it and make that choice every day.
Right.
When they don't have to necessarily. I think that's exciting.
Well, I want to tag on to something you just said. Obviously, Hal and the later Lanterns for Earth really became more of space cops, but Alan wasn't. Alan, was more of we'll say, tried and true superhero in the initial approach. Does that influence how you write Alan, knowing that, or how does that have any sort of impact?
In some way. I mean, look, Alan is a born hero, and we talk about that right from the start. Some people are just, whether they know it or not, or whether they even want to or not, they just seem to, Yes, Jeremy. Jeremy's a hero.
Some people are born heroes.
And villains. Some people are born villains.
Some people are born villains.
So we get to see Alan in that light. And we see him. He volunteered for the army. He's he saved a lot of lives, even before he ever, wore the ring. So I think there are people with that personality type and those archetypes, and Alan's always going to be one of them. I mean, we can all argue about who's the best Green Lantern.
Yeah.
We're never going to be right.
No, it's Josh Keaton.
Yeah.
Well,
see,
I just saw that guy the other day.
I
like that guy. He's great. He's a wonderful guy. So we can always, but we can all have favorites.
Right.
And I think the reason why Alan is such a favorite for a lot of folks is he has just, he's like Hal too, withstood the test of time.
Right.
And
he has a cape.
He has, and he's got a really cool cape.
Yeah, I mean, it's really cool.
He's somebody who we know we can count on. We know he's a hero. Alan, however, doesn't necessarily know that yet in the 1930s and the early 1940s, and that's part of this story. By the way, some of the other fun in the story too for Alan Scott is what we were talking about in terms of the powers.
Right.
Alan had weird powers in the original, from All American 16 on. There were some strange things that he did that we don't see Lanterns do now. If their power is sourced from the same place, why is that? And what are the possibilities that still exist, perhaps? And that's one of the things we're going to talk about and sort of explore.
That's awesome.
So let's talk about the art for a minute. Obviously, you're a couple issues in, but you've got some stellar artists working with both of you.
Yeah.
Can you talk about just seeing the first pages for each of your respective books?
I mean, we both worked with Zermanico on Flashpoint Beyond, so I always say art.
You say worked with Zermanico on Flashpoint Beyond.
Okay.
We watched the pages come in, and we just
yeah.
we're like, what do we do? He's amazing. Like, how can we write?
Well, no, it's even worse than that. It's like, hey guys, what's your opinion on these 12 different versions? And I'm like, no, like you are
Literally.
the genius. You do it.
They're all
and you're
amazing.
Yeah. Great art covers a multitude of sins, which is what I call my writing. So, it's amazing. I'm always thrilled. It's even like Eduardo Pansica on the Night Terrors. I'm constantly. It's just an embarrassment of riches every time I get something back from these guys, because I don't have any right to have this good of art to my paltry words. But you do realize it's a visual medium, and I know with Zermanico in particular, there is this feeling that I've now embraced. I kind of want to see what else he can do. So there's a little bit of like, ooh, I wonder what it would be like if he drew this. So like the constructs and stuff are now almost like challenges. And weirdly, it's like now Zermanico's my ring, and I'm like, ha ha ha, And then,
He's not kidding. Like, he literally, like, Jeremy will call and he's like, oh, I'm gonna pitch this to Zermanico. I'm gonna see if he can do it. I know he can. It's gonna be amazing.
He does everything. He's an utter genius. So
having fun now.
So it's just like, and now it's like, ooh, I want more splash pages, and I want more like stunning pieces of art that people are going to be like, oh my gosh, and that's what happens every time he sends it back. He'll send these like thumbnails, and I'm like, I don't know, like, because it's so nebulous to me. And then suddenly, and here's the finished project. I'm like, oh my gosh. It would be like, hey, do you like this marble? Okay, here's the statue of David, and I'm like, oh my, okay, great, But
the other thing about him is kind of what I was saying about Kian, which is that like Zermanico can do these incredible, like, just epic, beautiful pages, and then can just destroy you with a moment, with a look. And that level of detail. I mean, it's incredible. And he's bringing it to your book. It's incredible.
And oh, thank goodness he's there to plus every bad thing I have. It's like, well, we're going to add a panel here. We're going to adjust this. I'm like, great. Like, I had the problem. I just sent it along, and he's fixing it for me. So I'm like, woo.
I mean, that's what it is. Yeah. I mean, at its best, I think. And listen, we're both pretty new.
Yeah.
Still, kind of in the world of comics, but when it works. When it works, and it works best, it's when it's a real collaboration, and the artists are sort of making up for the stuff that we get wrong, or we can't communicate that well, and we try.
They're the magic people.
And sometimes we can help them out and bridge some stuff with some words when the pages need it. Kian said something to me when we got started on Alan Scott, and it was just a totally simple thing that forgive me, everybody else who's watching this is going to know who he's quoting, and I don't remember who he's quoting, but he said, that your job as the writer is to tell me the story, and my job is to tell the story to the reader. And I just never thought of it in those very simple terms.
Yeah.
Just, you're telling me a story, and I'm going to tell it to the world. And that's the whole thing, and that's when it works, and works at its best.
I mean, from what we've seen so far, obviously with your book already being out, in the first issue, there's the sequence of Hal flying up, testing out the ring, and then falling back to Earth.
Yeah.
And it felt so real and grounded.
I know.
And honestly, it's probably one of my favorite pages of a Green Lantern book in years. But it just really resonated, and I went back and looked at that page a couple times over, and I'm just like, picking out the pieces, there's so many nuances that were included, and you could feel the emotion that was happening, and I think that allows us as readers to connect.
Yeah.
So
I mean, he can really make these characters, static images, act and emote in ways that I'm like, I don't know, I wouldn't even know where to start.
But rest assured, every single nuanced detail that you saw was scripted by Jeremy Adams painstakingly.
Totally.
Every single
Not
one.
fast at all. Not. Yeah.
Well, we're excited for more Green Lanterns, of course, with Hal Jordan Green Lantern and with Alan Scott getting his time in the sun and the spotlight. Stay tuned for more Green Lantern DC coverage at Comics Online.